to America Reads Fun Learning Activities. We are college students who create learning activities for kids. Our fun activities are focused on reading, writing, and math. Thank you for joining us to learn today. My name is Lexi Herman. I am so excited to teach you my lesson today. We are learning about how to find figurative language within a poem and then find the theme. You will follow along with me through my PowerPoint. If you wish to take notes, please have a writing utensil and a piece of paper ready to go. Let's get started with today's video. Welcome to the winter wonderland of figurative language. Now it is time for us to dig a little deeper and learn how to use the words and elements of figurative language of a poem to find the theme. There are lots of different types of figurative language, as indicated in this figurative language tree. But it makes us question, how can we use these elements and find the theme of a story? Today, we are going to read the poem Winter Nights by Mary Butler. Let's read the poem together and get a better understanding of the elements of figurative language. Please pause the video and take your time to read this poem. After reading the poem, you may have noticed a few things while I read the poem. What do you hear as I was reading the poem? Like any poem, you should have heard that there is a lot of rhyming, or words that sound similar to each other. This leads us into elements of figurative language like similes and alliteration. A simile is to compare an object to another object. Alliteration is the use of similar sounds or letters in a sentence. I will cover more of this in just a little bit. But besides rhyming, poems also deal with a lot of repetition patterns. In Mary Butler's poem, we can hear lots of different repetition patterns within the structure. Lastly, the biggest actual sound used within the poem is the use of onomatopoeia, or the use of words to mimic sounds. Because this poem is in the narration of a bird, the sounds add a lot to the overall meaning of the poem. Now, we can identify these elements on a deeper level. To start, we have the rhyming scheme. We can see that the first two sets of lines rhyme. Then we have the third line, which does not rhyme at first. Then we have the next two lines that rhyme together. The last line seems to rhyme with the third line. This rhyming pattern continues throughout the rest of the poem. Lines 1 and 2 rhyme, then lines 3 and 6 rhyme, then lines 4 and 5 rhyme. This is an unusual pattern that adds character to the structure of the poem. There is also an element of a simile within the rhymes of our lines. Here, snug as snug indicates a comparison of warmth and nurturing between the mother and the child. We can also see the use of alliteration between these lines. The words branches, battle, boughs, and break all have the same letter. This indicates that the author's use of alliteration is to help create the scenery of the poem. Next, we will move on into the elements of repetition pattern within Mary Butler's poem. As I read the poem at the beginning of this PowerPoint, something should have stuck out to you. The first line of each stanza has the same sound and punctuation. These lines repeat the three words. It goes first word, second word, then first word again. Each has commas in between the second word and all end with an exclamation point. This repetition helps us develop the mood of the poem. Finally, we have lots of onomatopoeia elements within this text. As you heard, sounds like shriek, creak, and purr allows us readers to get an insight to the setting of the poem. These sounds add the overall character and mood of the poem. We can use these to help develop our theme. Now that we have been reading and listening to this poem, what are some elements of figurative language that we can physically see within Mary Butler's poem, Winter Nights? Like the repetition sounds of a poem, we can look at the structure of a poem to help us create the theme. Structure is very general, like the number of stanzas, line patterns, rhyming patterns, and etc. It encompasses the entire first glance at a poem. Next, we have the use of adjectives to help us create the image of the poem. Adjectives are words that add more detail and create the mood for the poem. In Mary Butler's poem, there are lots of adjectives that can be found. We will go through some examples in just a little bit. Lastly, there is more repetition. Repetition can be both heard and seen within a text. In our example for this PowerPoint, it is used in both. Let's start off with looking at the structure of the poem. We already kind of touched on this during our repetition sound slide earlier, but let's take another closer look. At first glance, it appears that all the stanzas are of equal length. There are 4 stanzas total with 6 lines in each. They also follow the same rhyme scheme. The structure of this poem is fairly simple and easy to understand. Next, we can look at how Mary Butler heavily uses adjectives to describe the characters and setting of her poem. Here, you can see that there are a lot of adjectives within the poem. As a reminder, adjectives are words that add more detail and create the mood for the poem. It also creates the image of the story. Words like icy create the image that these birds are in a cold winter storm. Readers can interpret the setting and image to their own. Even words like warm and tight provide a mood that is nurturing and safe. Some of the previous adjectives can be used to create the mood of the poem. Lastly, we have repetition once again. Like any poem, repetition can be seen and heard. It is important to know that repetition is a big part of the structure of a poem, which can help us develop the theme of the text. Like I had mentioned earlier in this PowerPoint, we can visually see that the poem has a distinct pattern. There are 4 stanzas total with 6 lines each. They also follow the same rhyme scheme. We see that each first line of each stanza has a pattern of first word, second word, first word again. Each has commas in between the second word and all end with an exclamation point. We also notice that each stanza has a third line that separates the rhyme scheme of the poem. Each third line is longer than the rest and breaks up the rhyme of the first and second line, and also the fourth and fifth line, until it meets its same rhyme again in the last 6th line. Now that we have gone through that example together, what figurative language do we use in our poem from our figurative language tree that was presented at the beginning of this PowerPoint? Well, we went through a lot of them. We had similes, repetition, imagery, alliteration, onomatopoeia, and mood. There are lots of elements that we can use to help develop our theme. So how do we find the theme of this poem? Clearly, the theme has to do with loving or nurturing relationship between a mother and her child. I'm sure you were all wondering, how do we know this is the theme? Let's go through and find out together. First, we can use the figurative language element of rhyming. In this rhyme I have highlighted, it shows that the mother was nurturing her child through this intense winter storm. The words warm and tight create the image that the mother is holding her child close and protecting them. Next, we can see that all the adjectives create the scene of peace and nurturing. Words like peaceful, snug, and cozy provide us with the sense that the mother and child are comfortable to each other. It is a sense of home. Going along with adjectives, they create the imagery of the poem. In the 18th line, specifically, it reads, "And besides her nestles close her furry child." This is a direct connotation of the theme, as it is nurturing, heartwarming, and sensitive. To tie everything together, the adjectives and imagery also create the overall mood of the poem. The mood is the overall emotion as you read the poem. From reading Mary Butler's poem, we can clearly see that the mood ties into the theme of heartwarming, nurturing, and caring. The mood makes us feel for the characters and understand the struggle they may encounter, but also the love that they feel towards one another. We can use all of those elements of figurative language to develop the theme of our poem. The elements of figurative language act as supporting evidence towards finding our theme. You can always use them to help find the theme, mood, or imagery of your poem. And that is it for our Winter Wonderland of Figurative Language video. I hope you all learned something and had so much fun. Thank you for learning with us today. We hope you come back and learn some more. Please like and subscribe to our channel, and we will be back with more videos.